Hello everybody, I'm Don Counts and we're at the Warrior exhibit in Fayetteville, Tennessee, and I have Linda Williams with me. And Linda, tell us who our guest is today.
Don, today we have Mr. Paul Matheny. He served in the Navy, and I've heard he has a very interesting story of his service, so we're happy to have you today, Paul.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here. I started my Navy career out in an interesting way. I was actually recruited by one of my students.
Wow.
And he came to take the evening drafting class at the tech school where I was working. And he was a Navy Reserve recruiter. And so he had asked me if he could interview some of our trades and industrial students for their CB unit in Nashville. And I got him set up with those students. He got a couple of really good kids. So he shows up one day and he said, Mr. Matheny, would you like to have a part-time job? And I said, well, most teachers are looking for part-time jobs. He said, I got a great deal for you in the Navy Reserve. So I enlisted in the Navy Reserve and drilled in Nashville. And then about a year later, I go to drill and they tell me that the chief recruiter wants to see me. And I said, okay. So I go to see him and I said, well, he must have heard about the bank I robbed when I was 16 years old. And they said, no, I think he's wanting you to get into some kind of program. So I went, and he said, Ronald Reagan has been elected president. We're going to have a 600-ship Navy. We need Navy supply officers, and you have a business degree. Would you like to go to Officer Candidate School? And I said, well, let me think about it. So I thought about it for about a week, and I had a little disagreement with the school board, and I called him. I said, how do I do this? And so I had to take another physical and a test. I went to OCS in Newport, Rhode Island. And as soon as I got through with that, I went to Supply Corps School in Athens, Georgia. And then I went to a guided missile destroyer, the USS Dewey. That was a haze gray and underway experience. And we were gone 75% of the time. And when you're a fleet sailor, you get a chance to go a lot of places. However, from time to time, you run into some very dangerous situations. And you know, if you're a fleet sailor, you can think about all the places you've been, but there are times when you think about how close you came to oblivion because you're on a Navy ship. And in those days, we were basically playing chicken with the Russian Navy.
Now, what year did you enlist?
1980.
Okay.
And I went to OCS in 1981. October the 1st is when I started. And so I served on a guided missile destroyer. And in those days, they wanted you to have a lot of different experiences. So my detailer sends me to an aviation squadron. So I'm doing aviation logistics. And then I go back to sea to an LPD. And that was interesting because it was forward deployed to the Persian Gulf. And our job was to try to convince Saddam Hussein not to invade. Obviously, we failed miserably. We visited all over the Persian Gulf, Qatar, Karachi, Manama, Bahrain, Kuwait, and tried to reassure them if anything happened, we would support them. So that was kind of how we started out our adventures in the Persian Gulf. Obviously, we had Desert Shield, then we had Desert Storm. And so working on an LPD in the middle of the Persian Gulf is a 20-hour-a-day job if you're lucky. A couple of times we stayed up 24 hours, 3 days in a row because there were things going on and the mission had to be completed. So it was, let's say, an interesting experience for a fleet sailor to be put into that environment. And then after that, I went back to a shore duty job. And I did a tour duty with the Navy Facility Command that owns all the Navy Reserve Centers. And so we went around to all these Navy Reserve Centers that were built in the 50s and 60s, and they were falling down. So I'm still hated by the Navy reservists in Nashville because we condemned the Navy Reserve Center. And it's just up the hill from where the Titans football stadium is. And so I got a lot of interesting comments from the senior officers after we told them that it was just falling down and that we had to close it. So we built an Armed Forces Reserve Center in Smyrna, Tennessee. So all the Nashville reservists drill there now. So that was a kind of an interesting type of billet. And then I did a recruiting billet and did another aviation billet. And then I was getting near the end of my 22 years in the Navy, and I was thinking about retiring and maybe going back to teaching. And my detailer called me and he said, "I have a great job for you, Commander, and it's going to look great on your resume." And I said, "Well, what's that?" And he said, "You're going to teach joint logistics to Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine officers at the Army Logistics Management College in Petersburg. And if you think you're going to go back to teaching, that'll look great on your resume." So I did that. And about a year into that particular job, the provost, who was a colonel, came to me and he said, "Hey, Commander, would you do me a big favor?" And I said, "Well, what's that?" He said, "I got a colonel who's sick in the sandbox. He's a logistics guy. Would you take his last 6 months?" Victoria, of course, thought I was crazy. And so I said, "Well, let me think about it." So I thought about it for a while. I said, "Well, it would be a real logistics job supporting Iraq, the war fighters in Iraq and Afghanistan. So it'd be an interesting way for a logistician to end his Navy career." They didn't tell me I had to do 3 weeks of infantry training at Fort Bliss, Texas. So myself, another Navy commander, a Master at Arms, and a first-class Master at Arms went and did infantry training. That's how I have that uniform that you've got displayed. Is they issued us all these uniforms and all the equipment, the helmets and everything that we needed. And so I went to Kuwait, to Camp Arifjan, and we worked out of the 3rd Army headquarters in Camp Arifjan. And we went to Baghdad, and we went to Balad, and we went to all these places to ensure that the warfighter had ammo, food, water, and everything they need. So it was interesting for a Navy guy to be working for an Army Brigadier General. Brigadier General Scheid, absolute best flag officer that I ever worked for. And we made sure that our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines in Iraq and Afghanistan had what they needed to carry out their mission. So it was a very interesting way for me to end my military career. And so I retired, and it was kind of interesting. I had 2 more classes they wanted me to teach when I came back. And I told them it was interesting because I had learned what was really going on. So it was fun telling them what was they were actually going to have to do if they were going to support the war fighters in Iraq and Afghanistan. And then I retired and I got a chance to teach ROTC down at Hazel Green High School. So I taught Naval Junior ROTC at Hazel Green High School for 11 years. And it was a chance to give something back. And we did save a few kids. We did save a few kids that probably would have ended up in jail if we hadn't tried to get them into the fold and teach them some self-discipline. You know, we were really taught citizenship more than we did anything else. We weren't recruiters and didn't advertise. We were recruiters. So it was really interesting, and it kind of helped me feel like I was giving back to my country and helping some young people who needed help. And so I retired from that job, and then I started writing books. And I've working on my 4th book. I've finished. I've had two books published. I'm working on the 3rd one. It will be published soon. And I've started on the 4th book. So it's given an old guy who had some interesting experiences in the Navy a chance to see the world, support the warfighter, defend my country, and help some young people who needed help, and tell some stories. So I'm telling stories now.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about life over there?
Oh, okay. You're talking about in the Middle East?
Yes.
Okay. I learned an enormous amount in my tour on the USS LaSalle in the Persian Gulf, because we were going and making port visits to Dubai and to Manama, Bahrain, and Karachi, and Qatar, and we interacted a lot with the emirs and the kings and the princes and the military commanders. And so we had a chaplain, God rest him, Father McGran. He was actually Lieutenant McGran, absolute best chaplain I ever ran into. He had been a New Jersey state trooper. His wife and his daughter were killed in a car wreck on the New Jersey Turnpike. They were hit by a drunk driver. He became a priest, and then he became a chaplain in the Navy. And he was the greatest guy. I wish I could find him today and thank him, because you take sailors 8,000 miles away from home and things happen. So he was really good helping us work with some of these sailors that had problems. However, he also was very well trained in the Arab culture. So I learned an enormous amount of the do's and the don'ts. You don't do anything with your left hand. You don't make any left-hand turns. You don't ever ask an Arab about his family. That's his business, that's not your business. And I guess the thing that helped me more than anything else was feuds never end. Arabs are tribal and they're feudal, and they live by the feud. And feuds never end. And it's one of the things that it bothers me sometimes that our leadership in the Department of Defense forget that. Because when you're dealing with them, you need to understand the culture. Indigenous people never forget a feud. So that was something that helped me actually when I went on to Iraq and Afghanistan. As you get, first question, what tribe? What clan? And so you needed to know that stuff. And so it was good that I was able to come back and finish up with a couple of classes at the Army Logistics Management College, where I could say you need to know what tribe they're in, what clan they're in, and what old feuds have been going on for 1,000 years. It was one of the things about dealing that we seem to keep forgetting even now when we're dealing with situations in Southwest Asia, is they're indigenous people and they never forget a feud.
Can you give an example of a feud?
Oh, absolutely. The Shia and Sunni feud, that's a real basic one, very, very basic, which we apparently totally ignored and didn't understand during our invasion of Iraq. In 632 AD, Muhammad dies. Who is going to be his successor? Okay, so there are 4 individuals who are vying to be a successor to Muhammad. The individual that he had actually picked personally was Ali. And Ali was much younger than these 40 and 50-year-olds that had worked with Muhammad, very closely with Muhammad, and thought that they should take over. And so this feud between the Shias, Ali and his followers, and the Sunni, who favored the 3 older guys, started then. And it has never ended. And eventually the 3 older guys pass away, and Ali takes over, as Muhammad wanted him to do. However, Ali and his son Hussein are assassinated by the Sunnis. And the war begins, and it has never ended. That's something I learned.
Wow.
Tell us about your books and how can people get them?
Oh, okay. All right. Well, when COVID hit and I couldn't do anything, I decided to write books. And I talked to my brother Daryl, and he said, all the stories about our adventures on the Barren Fork River are going to die with us. And I said, no, it's not. I'm going to write a book. So Daryl and I and the York brothers had a lot of adventures on the Barren Fork River. So I wrote the book. I called it Gypsies, Beasts, and Indian Chiefs. And it has gypsies in it, beasts in it, and Indian chiefs in it. And it's about our adventures on the Barren Fork River. It takes probably about, 4 hours to read it, I guess, short book. The second book, I came up with the idea when I called Dr. Ralph Ruby, who was a roommate, or who lived in the same dorm I lived in at the University of Tennessee. And he had done the 2-year Navy enlistment to keep from getting drafted into the Army. But he was a computer wizard. He helped me take the 2 computer classes I had to pass to get a business degree. So we became great friends. But anyway, I called him. He was a tenured professor at Arkansas State University, and had written a couple of books on software, how to write software and stuff. So I called him, and he finally remembered me, and he said, you know, all those stories that these veterans would tell that had come in from Vietnam after about 3 or 4 beers. He said, it's a shame that those stories will never be repeated. And I said, yeah, they will. I'll write a book about it. So that's how I came up with A River Rat Goes to Ayers Hall. He's from Winchester, Tennessee. He's on PBRs in the Mekong Delta. He gets wounded during the Tet invasion. He gets over it. He goes to the University of Tennessee on his GI Bill. So it's about 40% of the book is Vietnam, and the rest of it is what he went through with all the confusion and the protests and being called names to get a degree at the University of Tennessee and get on with his life. Now the third book is really kind of a different subject. It's the stories that a Cherokee grandfather told his grandson. And it's stories that were repeated to him by various Cherokee families. So I have got a story in there about the Cherokee Little People. It's the Cherokee's version of the Irish leprechaun. And I have a story about the Magic Cave. I've got a couple of Trail of Tears stories that the families shared. The last story is probably the coolest story. It's about a young man who was born in Cherokee, North Carolina. His mother and father had alcohol problems. Both died. And at 2 years old, he was adopted by a wonderful couple from Columbus, Ohio. So he was raised in Columbus, Ohio. And they always told him, they were great people, they told him who he was, where he came from. And they said, when you're 18 years old, if you want to change your name to your last name that's on your birth certificate, you can do that. So he did that. Unfortunately, in high school, he had the wrong friends. So they get in trouble, go before the judge, and the judge says, I'm going to give you 2 choices. Number 1, I'm putting you in jail for 6 months, you're going to rehab, or you can join the Army. So he joins the Army, and he goes to the 82nd Airborne. Winds up in Korea, and it's kind of humorous. There's a humorous story about why they started calling him the Indian. You know, obviously your birth certificate, you have to put your race down there. So he became the Indian. So in Vietnam, he was always the guy on the point because he was the Indian. And so and he gets severely wounded. And it's an interesting story how he regains his status as a Cherokee Indian. He meets my first cousin, well, one of my cousins, David Youngwolf. David was a lawyer, but he was born in Cherokee, North Carolina. So he helps him regain his membership in the Eastern Band of Cherokee. So it's a very interesting story of how this guy goes from a 2-year-old and taken to Columbus, Ohio. He's an urban Indian. He gets in the Army because all of his records say he's an Indian. They put him out front. So that's kind of a humorous story. He lived, and fortunately, he lived through it. And then the fourth book is another incredible story, if you'll bear with me. I had lung surgery 4 months ago, and I'm a jogger and a walker and so forth. I started having breathing problems going up hills, and I went to Victoria's chiropractor, and Dr. Matheny, and she x-rayed my lower back and called me the next morning saying, you got a bunch of fluid on your left lung. So I wound up having video-assisted thoracic surgery where they removed a mass I had 3 places where the lining of my lung was stuck to the wall of my lung, and they blew some talcum powder looking stuff and separated all that. Thank God, everything was benign. They even sent some material off to an Air Force lab in Miami that tests for exotic, something might have picked up in Afghanistan or Iraq, and that's so far has been all negative. So I'm very happy that, that all that was benign. But anyway, I'm laying in the, I've never been in the hospital in my life. I'm in the hospital for 10 days. In walks one of the chaplains, who happens to be a Catholic priest, and he was a very nice guy. And I told Victoria, I can't remember his name. I was under the influence of good painkillers, so forgive me. And so we talked about, I told him I was a whiskey drinking Baptist. He kind of laughed at that. And we talked about the Catholic faith a little bit. So after he left, I thought, I know what a good theme would be for my 4th book. And it's this. If you ever thought in your lifetime, if I'd have made this decision instead of that decision, how would it turn out? Okay. So we talked about some of the churches in the area. So I came up with the idea that this young Catholic altar boy is going to have a chance meeting with St. Michael the angel. And he's going to help St. Michael out, and St. Michael is going to give him 3 chances. So the stories are about the 3 decisions he made and how they turned out. So that's going to be the 3rd book, and I'm working on it as we speak. Oh, my 4th book, yeah.
How do people get these books if they want them?
Okay, the books are available on Amazon Books. And you can, I have a pen name. My middle name is Douglas, so I came up with Doug. The French spelling of Matheny is Matheny, so my pen name is Doug Matheny, M-E-T-T-E-N-E-Y-E. That was the French spelling of the name, so I use that. In fact, that was a suggestion from my niece who had written some books, and she said, are you going to talk about all the partying that went on at the University of Tennessee? And I said, yeah, I am. She said, they can be mad at Doug Matheny, not at Paul Matheny. So that's why I came, frankly, be honest, that's why I came up with the pen name.
That's good.
That is good. So would you recommend a young person today to go into the service?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not happy with some of the things that are going on right now. I'm just going to be honest with you. The half a dozen young people that I had that were in the Navy when I retired, 4 of them have gotten out because they said they just didn't want to put up with some of the stuff that was going on right now. Our country still needs them. We still need the best and the brightest that we can find to go in the military. I think, I'm a historian, we're almost at a point where we're very similar to the 1930s with the things that are going on, with the problems with China, the problems with Russia, the problems with Iran and North Korea. So it's scarily similar to the situation, the world situation in the 1930s. And we need individuals in leadership positions who understand that. But also, we need a military that is capable, well-trained, and qualified to do the things we need to do to confront all these challenges. So I, as a Navy person, I still encourage people to go into the Navy. However, they're having problems recruiting, and I believe they're having problems recruiting because of some of the politically correct things we're doing. And we need, the thing about the military that was so great, it was all about promoting people on merit, meritocracy. And you had people from all over the United States, all different colors and ethnicities, and we had one mission, that was to carry out the mission of the United States Navy, and to carry out whatever the mission was, and to do it to the best of our ability. And that's, we've kind of gotten away from that a little bit. And we need, you still have to have the same body strength to carry your buddy out of a compartment which is on fire, You still need to be able to run the same amount of speed if you need to get out of a place in a hurry. You need to have the same amount of upper body strength. And you absolutely have to be able to be trained and to get through the training. And that's an issue that bothers me a great deal right now. And I think we need to get back to, here are the requirements, and these are the people we need to find to meet the requirement. It doesn't matter whether they're male or female, or where they come from, the color of their skin. Can you do the job? And when I was in the Navy, that was it. Can this sailor do the job? And if they did, that was great. And it didn't matter who they were. And we need to get back to that.
Good. Anything else?
No, I think that we certainly do appreciate you spending your time with us this afternoon and doing this interview.
Well, you're quite welcome. I escaped you twice, so third time is charm, right?
I'm persistent.
Okay. And thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it greatly.
Thank you.